Now to a focus of the day, Christina Were came face to face with compassion fatigue when she cared for her mother who suffered a stroke. Here is her story.
I've been a caregiver for 3 years. My mom got a stroke towards the end of January 2017. It was the last Saturday of January. She had actually just been in Nairobi. She had visited me on her way from the US and then gone to Kakamega, and then she got the stroke. And so that's where the journey began. About 3 months after she came to live with me, I resigned from my workplace. And I would say that was a big transition. And it shifted me from just simply financing her care to actually engaging in her care. Despite having paid nurse aides, it did not exempt me from all the emotion and the responsibility that comes with being a family caregiver. I think the first thing I dealt with was anxiety, the anxiety of my mother could go any minute. It took a long time for me to be comfortable to be out of the house for even half a day. I would be so scared. And unless you process that, you can unconsciously also begin to feel resentful. Resentful towards the person you're caring for, resentful towards God, resentful even towards yourself. Then my mom was also processing. She was processing her loss of independence. I had shifted to the role of the caregiver, and it was such an intense role that I would forget to be just her daughter. At that point, I thought, I'm alone and I'm stressed and this is overwhelming. And yet I was really enjoying the blessing of being with my mom. At some point, I got into serious negotiations and arguments with God. Are you punishing me? What is it? What have I done wrong? Everybody who called, save for a few, they were only interested in my mom because she was the sick person. I was well. Compassion fatigue takes a long time to recover from. Be patient with yourself.
And that definitely gives us perspective of what we'd like to talk about this morning, compassion fatigue. So exactly what is this and how does it even manifest? We'll get to know that even as we talk to our specialist in studio, Dr. Sheila Konyu Mushemi, who is a clinical psychologist. We're also joined by caregivers in studio. We also have James Kabindu, who is a caregiver to 2 children with special needs. Also joining us virtually, Christina Were, who is a caregiver, as you heard and seen, of a mother who suffered a stroke. On Sunday, who is a caregiver to a sister with gangrene. And Isabella Waruguru, who is a caregiver to a mother who had dementia, but she actually passed on in June of this year. We'll hear all their stories in a moment. But for now, I think, Dr. Konyu, we need to understand what exactly compassion fatigue is.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me, Gladys. When we think about compassion fatigue, we're thinking about that physical and emotional just exhaustion that comes from, continuously caring for somebody, continuously offering this support and just being a caregiver. But it also not just happens for caregivers within the family setup. It's also for those who are in like the helping profession, where you're always like showing empathy, showing care for others, and sometimes that can feel tedious if it's done so long and you're also not replenishing your own supplies.
Yeah. And would you equate that feeling to like an emotional burnout?
Yeah, it's definitely related to burnout because burnout is that sense of feeling like, there's a sense of dissatisfaction, there's a sense of you're pouring and you're not getting back as much as you're pouring in. So when it comes to that emotional aspect, I think like, I think Christine, where I talked about, that sense of anxiety, that sense of feeling, you're caring for somebody and they don't seem to be getting better, and it's something that is so long term that sometimes the end is not often very promising. And so dealing with those, wrestling with those emotions of, this is somebody I love, I'm trying to care for them, and they are not maybe getting better as quickly. And then also you asking your own questions of, you know, like she was saying, wrestling with God and trying to figure out why is this happening to me. So that whole emotional process, I think is part of compassion fatigue. And I think the core thing with compassion fatigue is you get tired of your core of this being compassionate, being empathetic, is the one that becomes depleted, which is not so much what happens within burnout. Because burnout, you can feel, you know, you can get tired and not feel fulfilled, but that sense of empathy is still there.
Okay, so you talk about the essence of feeling like you're running out of empathy. So what are the symptoms? How do I know that I'm actually suffering from compassion fatigue?
That's a great question. So one of the things to be able to monitor within yourself, even just warning signs, is feeling overwhelmed. So you're caring for this person and it's just coming to the place where you're feeling tired, more exhausted, both physically, so that even when you rest, you're not feeling as replenished. But then emotionally, it's just feeling more heavy in your heart. And then you're also not, and then also there's a sense of avoiding. So you have this person that you need to care for, but you're trying to find every excuse not to be in their presence, or to maybe you come home late because you're like, I don't know if I want to spend time with them. So that avoidance can also cue you is something happening. Again, also physical symptoms, like you're not being able to sleep. Your eating pattern is not going very well. So you're not also caring for yourself. I think those are some of the ones that, you know, kind of can cue you that, hey, things are not going well. I think another big one is you stop feeling this sense of empathy and sympathy, you know. So you're just almost becoming numb, almost feeling like, this thing, I can't keep doing it anymore. So that you become more cold, more numb. I think that can also cue you that, hey, something is, you need to pay attention to something going on.
Okay, and I think even before we hear from the caregivers, you had mentioned some of the people that are at risk of suffering compassion fatigue, and you mentioned those in the healthcare profession. Who are the other categories that fall under the risk factors?
Yeah, so anyone who's exposed to people who are suffering or going through some kind of trauma, so you're always witnessing that. So yes, people in the healthcare profession, and especially those who say are working in ICU or in like the cancer wards or in hospice, those are even more vulnerable. But beyond that, even lawyers or the police, or people even within the prison system, or even teachers.
Journalists?
Or even journalists, because I think of the things that you guys cover and the things you have to witness. So it looks like maybe even parents, when you're always giving of yourself and you're not taking time to replenish. So I think this thing with compassion fatigue, like we're all vulnerable. You and I'm in the mental health profession. I'm vulnerable as a journalist, you're vulnerable. So we all have to think about how are we giving more than we are replenishing the reservoirs, and do we need to maybe check in on that? Okay,
now let's hear from the caregivers themselves. And as I said, we have James Gabindu, who is a caregiver to 2 children who suffer or live with rare disease. It's called phenylketonuria. PKU is how we are going to actually abbreviate it as. And James, exactly what is this that your children go through?
Thank you very much, Gladys, for having me. My name is James Kabindu, as you put it, and I'm a father to 2 children with special needs. And the first one is 17 years now, and the second one is 13 years. And what we've been going through, the children have this condition called PKU, as you've put it, or phenylketonuria, which is a rare metabolic disorder. And I've said the boy is 17 years. So we have been in this situation for about 16 years, actually 16 years or so, with both the children. So it has not been easy, but every moment has been a learning moment.
Okay, so you say it is a metabolic condition. What exactly, how does it manifest? What are the symptoms?
Okay, what happens is that, first of all, these children are born normal. But after some time, within the time they're approaching year 1, they start having these normal ailments. Initially, they start manifesting as normal conditions like fever. In most cases, you'll be told it's an infection here and there. So we'll be in and out of hospital. Then after some time, when they're approaching, middle of the second year or even first year, they start now regressing in their achieved milestones. And that is the time now we were told that this is a disability and we need to seek advice elsewhere. And now we started focusing on disability bodies. Now, it took us some time because these conditions resembled autism and in some cases cerebral palsy. So initially, even the cards that we have for disability, we were told that this is autism, and in some cases, some elements of cerebral palsy. And we've been doing interventions on that. But when the boy was 13 years, we decided to check again, and we took them to India. That is where we were told, actually, these is what we call inborn errors of metabolism, or a condition called PKU, whereby the body cannot be able to metabolize one amino acid. And this amino acid, in our particular case, is called phenylalanine. Where the body is not, once you consume these proteins and you take this amino acid, the body is not able to release another chemical that is supposed to help complete the cycle, in this case, metabolize. And when it is left unattended in the blood, with the time, that is when the child starts now having fevers, if it's not attended to, convulsions. And that is how it's, we normally get misdiagnosed as epilepsy, infections and all that. Ultimately, it affects the brain, and the child now sinks into disability, and in particular, intellectual impairment.
Okay, I like the way you've broken it down. If you can have those graphics on air to just explain further what exactly PKU is. And as you mentioned, is that untreated PKU can lead to intellectual disability, seizures, behavioral problems, and mental disorders. And it may also result in smelly breath, skin, or urine. Now, this sounds like so much to deal with. And this is a journey you and your wife have been on, as you've said, for the last 16 years. Question is, how do you and your wife take care of yourselves even as you offer care to your children?
Thank you, Gladys. First of all, let me admit that it has not been easy, because the first thing that happened is that I was working, my wife was working, she had her own business, I was employed, and you can imagine now in such setups, our life pattern started being interfered with. You can imagine in an employment situation where we're in and out of job, you're going for therapies, you're going for medical, clinics and all that. It affected my work, and ultimately I found myself at home. My wife had gone home a bit earlier so that she can be able to take care of that, especially when the now second born sank into this disability. So when we are there, as I've said, it's not easy. Every life pattern actually was put upside down. It took time for us to accept, but ultimately we accepted. And the most critical thing along the way was how we are going to take care of ourselves, as you've put it. It reached a point whereby I found out I was almost breaking down. My wife was having this blood pressure and all that. And a doctor called me one time and told me, James, you know what, you have to stand firm and you have to be there for the family. And I believe this is a challenge to most men, because you can now imagine I'm in this situation and I'm now told you have to now be there for the family. Because when we had gone to the doctor, it was my wife who had issues of blood pressure and all that. And from that time, I think I made my decision. I made a decision and I said, it's fine, I'll take up the challenge. I'll not only stand for my wife, I'll stand for my children. And God willing, I'll even stand in the gap to make the society understand something about this.
Okay, and
Yeah.
we'll talk more about your coping mechanisms in a moment. But as you said, you represent the men who have a hard time talking about these things and are always told by society they've got to be strong. Well, let's listen in on another caregiver. In this case, Christina, where we had a snippet of your story, and your mother suffered from a stroke. You had to care for her. And I love the way you end that conversation by saying compassion fatigue takes a while to recover from, so you've got to be patient with yourself. Where are you at with dealing with compassion fatigue?
Good morning, Gladys. Thanks so much for having us on this show. I would say I'm in a very good place because I learned how to be kind to myself. One of the things that many caregivers struggle with is being kind to themselves because our expectations of ourselves are very high. The expectations of others are very high. Processing what we're going through, sometimes we struggle with guilt. We feel guilty for being human. We feel guilty for being tired. We feel guilty for not having the strength to be superwoman or superman. And so I learned to be kind to myself. I began to explore and to reach out to other caregivers to give support. And the many moments of, aha, I am not alone, or this is normal, showed me that it's okay. It's okay to be real. It's okay to struggle. It's okay to feel tired. And I think that realization of it's okay to be human and to struggle was the beginning of the journey of recovery. And just knowing that it's what I was going through was not unusual. So recognizing what I was struggling with, recognizing my own triggers, recognizing this, I really don't know where this crazy sense of guilt comes from. But when you talk to many caregivers, they feel guilty. They feel guilty for being tired. You feel guilty for buying yourself an ice cream when you could have spent it on somebody's medication. You feel guilty that you slept through the night when you should have woken up 10 times to check if somebody was okay. So learning to recognize that and deal with that put me in a good place. And I think I'm doing good.
Okay, and
Yeah.
for purposes of those who probably are joining in at this moment and they missed out on your previous story, in a nutshell, just let us know, what are these symptoms that you are manifesting?
Exhaustion, I think because of little sleep. So I had repurposed the dining room to become my mother's bedroom because she couldn't go upstairs because of her, she's paralyzed on the right side. And we had nurse aides, but my mom would cough in the night and I would be quick, without the blink of an eye. I would be downstairs and by her bedside and checking before the nurse has woken up. And the nurse would be like, hiya, you're here, and I wouldn't even know. So that tells you how little I was sleeping. Or sometimes I would go, there's also an element of anticipatory grief. The fear that that the end will come is very scary and heavy. So sometimes I would go down the stairs at night, and the way you look at a baby and check, is the baby breathing? How come I can't see the blanket moving? And so I would be peering in the darkness, and suddenly my mom would wake up startled, and then I would have to say, oh, no, I was just checking. And so lack of sleep, poor eating habits. I stopped exercising. I stopped rehydrating and drinking water. And then social isolation. The more tired I got, I got afraid of sounding like a broken record. How is your mom? She's this. How are you? I'm this. And I started thinking I sound like a broken record. So I began to isolate. I think those for me were the symptoms. And then sometimes snapping at little things that ordinarily would not make me snap. I'll just find they had really stressed me out. So those for me were the signs that I was actually burning out.
Okay, Christina, how is Mama doing?
Oh, Mama is doing well. She's watching you right now.
Excellent.
I told her 7 a.m. is too early, and she was like, no way, it's not too early. I have to watch this.
Excellent. And I think if you're just joining in, Christina's mom suffered from a stroke, and a stroke occurs when the blood supply to part of your brain is actually interrupted by one thing or another. And in her case, she was cared for by Christina, and today, as she's saying, she's doing much, much better. Now, to somebody else who is also a caregiver and joining us this morning virtually is Anne Sunday Akali. It's good to see you. You say you're a caregiver to a sister with gangrene. If we can have first the graphics on that to just understand what exactly is this condition. It refers to the death of body tissue due to either a lack of blood flow or a serious bacterial infection. Commonly affects the extremities. Those are your toes, fingers and your limbs, but it can also occur in your muscles and internal organs. Now, chances of developing gangrene are higher if you have an underlying condition that can damage your blood vessels and affect blood flow, such as diabetes or hardened arteries. Well, Anne, what has been your experience catering for your sister?
Thank you, Gladys, for hosting me through this show. It has been 13 good years going through as a caregiver to my son. It all started on a Sunday morning. She was actually manning a small business. And, by that Sunday, she was okay. So today she was feeling bad and went to the hospital. On Friday, the same, we were being told she's going to be amputated because of gangrene. The doctors did all the experiments to her. There was no disease in her body, no cancer, no diabetes, no nothing. But here she was with rotting legs. Gangrene is a blood mixture with water, and therefore no flow of blood can go. So within a week, she was to be amputated. All the meat from the feet were falling down. You can imagine the smell. So she was amputated, and she had to stay in the hospital for 7 good months. The mental torture that I actually went through was immense. To and fro the hospital almost every day. And if I'm not there, I have to look for someone to. There was so much that was happening. The fatigue, loss of appetite on my side, nobody to turn to, all the immediate people disappearing and leaving you all alone, in thinking that you are the strong and you can handle it all by yourself. Going through the depths was like the of the day. The circle, the bank, you can name it. Loss was really too much.
Mm-hmm.
She stayed there for that 7 months. And many times you would to her, and she's like, it's like she's blamed for all what she's going through. You feel like you are not doing enough. You can't sleep like me. I'm on shift. Sometimes I'm night shift. I have to go to the hospital. I'm supposed to go to night shift. Go to the. I've not slept. So it was really, 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 really hard time for me.
Okay.
A time that I actually have never gotten an answer to the situation.
Okay, and it sounds really intense, and I'm just wondering, your sister, was she your mother? Is she your mother?
Pardon?
Is your sister a mother?
Yeah, my sister is alive now. She's okay. She's using prosthetics because all the legs were amputated.
Okay, we will take care of your connection because we're having a hard time communicating. But when we come back, I would like to understand who else in that setting that you take care of, because you had mentioned that there is an extended family. But before we get to that, let's hear from Isabella. Do we have Isabella? Okay, so at this point, I think, Dr. Konyu, it's obvious that everyone can suffer compassion fatigue in different ways depending on what they're dealing with. But some things are very common in all of them, that their lives are literally turned, to use their words, upside down. Talk about that.
Yeah, and I really just appreciate each of them sharing their experience for others to learn. Yeah, the word I kept hearing is just disruption, you know. So here is this unexpected thing that comes. I think about, like, you know, as a parent, you bring your kids into the world having all these plans and all these ambitions for them. And then you're told that they have to have this condition, not just for like 1 week or 1 month, but for years. You know, so this disruption comes and it's there for, somebody talked about 16 years, 13 years. And that makes sense that your life is turned upside down. It shifts so many different things. You had even just the physical space where you're caring for somebody, that is changed, you know. So now the dining room where we're supposed to be hosting people is now converted into the place of caring for others. Or like now with working. You know, so you're supposed to be having your own livelihood and going to work, but now somebody's depending on you. So you have to think about, okay, so am I going to continue working, or am I going to, you know, have to stop that? And what does it mean in terms of the finances, you know? So that disruption can be a lot, not just physically, but then now emotionally, you know. You have all these hopes and ambitions about this person, or just expectations of how life is supposed to go, and then now you're having to shift that and care for this person. And again, like I said, not just for 1 day or 1 month, for years and years. You know, I think about how Anne was talking about her sister being in the hospital for, is it 7 months?
Yes.
You know, so you can imagine like a kind of reorienting your life around the care for that person. So it's really hard.
And how do you cope with that kind of disruption, considering everyone is looking up to you, including the patient? How do you ensure that you keep your head above water?
Yeah, that's really tough. I think the first place to is even acknowledging this is hard. You know, this is this is something that was unexpected. My life was going like this, but now this thing has come and it's spinned things around, right? Because when you don't accept, then you're not able to make the necessary adjustments. You know, you have to acknowledge that something is different. And the way that I used to do my things, I can no longer do them the same way, right? But if you don't do that, then you get stuck in trying to live as though things are normal in a reality that's not normal. And I think even COVID has actually been a way for us to think about how we handle these kinds of disruptions. And so first thing, acknowledge and accept, even though that takes time. Another thing is to tune into how you're feeling, how you think about the situation, right? Tune into that anger, that sadness. It's okay that, you know, you are expecting your life to go in this direction and now it's gone in this way. There has to be some feelings you're having, right? There has to be some anger, some sadness. You know, if you don't tune into that, then it manifests and starts showing up in a different way, right? So processing that and then giving yourself, being kind to yourself. You know, I really like that idea of being patient with yourself, acknowledging that some days are hard, some days are difficult, are not easy, but there are also some good days. And then also seeking social support, right? This is not a journey you're trying to do by yourself. It's a marathon in time. It's not like a sprint. You know, a sprint, you get all your energy and run 100 meters and boom, you're done. Marathon, you have to pace yourself. You have to start slow, you know, pick up pace, and then as the journey goes, you kind of keep moving on. And so this journey of caregiving, because of how long-term it is, you need other people, you know. So having courage to ask for help.
Okay.
Having courage to say, hey, imagine I can't do this by myself, I need your help. And that's a vulnerable place to be, but it's essential because of how long-term this journey is.
Okay, and James, I'm curious to know, you said as a guy you were told you've got to stand in the gap for your family, and Daktari is talking about how important it is to ask for help. Did you have a hard time asking for this help?
Thank you. I think the first thing, as Daktari said, is to accept. And once we accepted, the next thing is, first of all, we had to get information. And after getting, when you're in this situation, like in ours, you get a lot of information, a lot of advice. But it will take time for you to filter through until you get the correct way of doing things. Now, in our case, it was not easy, first of all, seeking for help or asking for help. You know, as I said, initially it comes with some betrayal, some failing to accept. But along the way, we found out that we have to seek for help. Now, it is very tricky, understanding our society, because when you're seeking help, you have to be very careful that you do not enter into a situation whereby, you know, with the stigma around, with the misinformation about some of these conditions, we found out that you can go out there to seek for help, and then people misinterpret, and you sink even further. But, okay, finally we've gone out and we have sought some help. And let me say, initially it was forthcoming, but as the journey goes, you find you're left there alone. But the most important thing, I believe the best help comes from God. He's the one who sends help to you. He's the one who will get someone who is not even, who does not even know you. But the most important thing is to move out and seek that help. Yeah.
Okay, and Christina, you mentioned you even had a live-in nurse, but you still found yourself doing most of the heavy lifting. Was this you accepting help, but also still attached to the fact that this is my mother, I want to do it all and no one else can do it better than me?
Oh, wow. I think caregiving is a really complex, as Daktari said, understanding yourself and processing, I think is very important, because how different ones of us cope may be different, how we understand things may be different. Yes, she's my mother. And actually, at one point, for almost 2 months, because of the financial constraints, I was on my own. I didn't have a nurse aide. We went through a difficult season, and you make adjustments. I really don't know how to answer that question, Gladys, except to say it's complex. So it could be that it was me just being a daughter. It was me just wanting the best for my mother. It was me wanting to understand what is going on, how is she being cared for, because she had become speech impaired. And one of the things I was also concerned about is I wouldn't want a situation where maybe she was neglected or abused and I couldn't tell, because I was totally detached from the caregiving process. So taking care of her also helped me to be able to connect with actually what is going on, and to be able to step in when I needed to.
Right.
Also, sometimes a nurse wasn't able to come to work, so I would have needed to step in. Yeah.
Okay, and as you went along and you realized that you were facing compassion fatigue, did you realize the importance and, of course, the power of delegation?
Yes, absolutely. That again was a journey, Delegation is important. I would say a team approach to how you care for your family member. And by the way, this team approach can be in so many different ways. One of our nurses sings. She's actually a gospel musician. And Lucy would sing with my mom. Now, Lucy would be singing in Kikuyu, by the way. My mom is Luya. But you see, I think God communicates irrespective of language. One of my mother, despite the illness, is still very connected with global and local politics. And one of my sisters would come and they would sit and discuss what's happening in Kenya, what's happening with Donald Trump, what's happening, with Obama, everything that's going on. That is part of the support. Another sister is so very connected with the wider family network, and she could come and keep my mother in touch with this cousin and the brother of the nephew of the other cousin. So the support, I would say the team approach can come in so many different ways, because that would give my mother connectedness and information, but it would also give me respite and not trying to be everything, one bundle of superhumanness to my mother.
Okay, we hear you, Christina. And we were cut off earlier on from Sunday. Do we have Anne back on the line? Okay, Anne, you were explaining to us, she now joins us on phone. You were explaining to us that you cater for your sister full-time because both her legs were amputated at the knees. And I was asking, does she have a family of her own? Does she have children?
Yeah, she has 2 daughters, but the father took off when the situation was bad. So she's all alone with the kids.
So that means you not only take care of your sister, but also had 2 children. And you mentioned you also have a family of your own, right?
Yes.
Okay, so who takes care of you?
I do, through my small salary. And at the same time, I've been taking care of the daughters through the school, food, clothing, and everything.
Okay, and earlier we were talking about the importance of asking for support. Do you ask for help, and is it forthcoming?
Yeah, initially it was not forthcoming, but as years have been going, I've actually been asking my brothers, and they've tried to chip in. Yes.
Okay, and when you go about taking care of this extended family, are there times that you find that it is too much to handle?
Yes, it is. Many a times it is too much to handle. It has taken me go deep into debt, like taking loans through the bank, through the circles, or my salary. When you get, you just divert to so much, and you find that you are left with nothing. You can't even buy yourself a thing. But I've learned to cope with it, and I can say it's God who has been merciful on that.
What is your sister doing now?
She's doing great. She has actually been so much devoted to church. And the only problem is she's growing too fat because of the mobility is kind of limited. And the prosthetics, many a times they break. And fixing it also has been a big challenge because they are kind of expensive. And those ones that stay long, they are really, really damn expensive, and I've not gotten to get them for her, actually.
Journey has been on for how long again?
It is now 13 years since
13 years. Okay, we hear you. And I'm told we're now joined by Isabella Waruguru, who was a caregiver to her mom who passed on earlier this year. And she was living with dementia. If we can have those graphics up, dementia is actually a syndrome which causes deterioration in memory, thinking, behavior, and the ability to perform everyday activities. Now, symptoms include forgetfulness, limited social skills, and thinking abilities, so impaired that it interferes with daily functioning. Although dementia mainly affects older people, it is actually not a normal part of aging. Isabella, you lost your mom in June, and we are so sorry for that. But the journey of being a caregiver to her was actually a long one. Talk about your experience.
Yes, Gladys. I lost my mom in June this year, and it was not an easy journey. I remember my mom started developing behavior change back in 2016, and at the time we realized that she's doing things which are not normal, like she could forget wearing one shoe. Then at times she could develop something we call being paranoid, accuse you for something that you have not done. And at the time we realized that she required medication so that we can get to the root of the matter. It was difficult because this is something which was not familiar to us. We had never, or we had not seen somebody who was showing such kind of behaviors. And so we had to inquire from some of our relatives who are in the medical section. And again, I decided to try and Google the symptoms, whereby I was able to get information about dementia, whereby the symptoms that she had developed were like showing the disease is dementia and Alzheimer's. So that time I decided to Google the doctor who can handle the issue, and I was able to get information about the neurologist. In the process, I also got a Facebook page of Alzheimer's Dementia Kenya, whereby I got contact of one Elizabeth Mweke, and I decided to contact her. I was lucky she was able to take me through the journey. She told me she had the same experience with the father, and she's the one who gave me the best contact for a doctor who can handle the issue. That is Dr. Paul Kioi. From that, we started the journey, and I booked for the appointment. The first appointment we booked for my mom. And when we took her to the doctor, there are those tests that the doctor performed. And the doctor told me it's like my mom is experiencing something called dementia. So I was like, what's dementia? The doctor was able to explain to me it is a disease that affects the brain. But he said there are different types of dementia. So he was supposed to conduct a certain test called the EEG, whereby they are able to check on the brain frequency. When the results were out, the doctor told me my mom was suffering from a type of dementia called frontotemporal.
Okay.
And from there, he prescribed the drugs, whereby my mom was put in a drug called Aricept, which was to improve the memory.
Okay.
And she was put in another drug called fluoxetine, which was to cater for the behavior change. But all through since 2016, as much as she had taken the drugs for all those years up to 2020, we never saw great change. Now, the worst scenario was how to cope with her, because there are times she could experience something we call being paranoid, and other times she could there is another characteristic whereby she developed, whereby she could imagine things which are not there. Like if she could see or watch the TV, she could imagine those people are talking about her. And it was not easy for us to explain to her that these people are not, they are not here. It's like they are pictures. Then the whole scenario of taking care of her as an individual got me to a point whereby I started developing fatigue. At times it affected me mentally because I was in denial. This is someone we used to sit down, we listen together. Now she's like, we cannot sit back and listen again. And it's like, I was like, why my mom? So I was fighting between the reality and not accepting the changes.
Okay, now Isabella, I'll stop you at that point. When we come back from this short break, we'll hear more about your challenges and, of course, the coping mechanisms that you picked up along the way, even as we also hear from Dr. Konyu in as far as some of the issues you brought up in your experience. We'll be right back. Thank you for staying with Your World. My name is Gladys Gachanja. Today we talk about compassion fatigue, even as we look into the welfare of caregivers. Before we get to it, Vanda Ortega, a Witoto indigenous who lives in a community in suburban Manaus, goes around her community to give medication to residents, take their blood pressure and their oxygen levels, as they have no other ways to monitor potential COVID-19 symptoms. Vanda Ortega says, we don't have any assistance here. I'm the one doing this job of helping our relatives. Here there are people with high blood pressure, diabetes, who are not able to go to the basic care units. I am monitoring more than 40 people in the community and 5 more serious cases. There are elderly who have hypertension, diabetes, and many are not taking the medicine because they can't go and get their medicine. Luis Mendez, a resident, says, we have no transportation like many people have, like people who have their car and can go to the hospital. I'm here with nothing, and if I'm sick, I'm going to go walk into the hospital. All people can't go out anymore, and it has made everything difficult for us.
Que fica distante do centro da cidade.
O nariz está escorrendo.
We celebrate her and other caregivers. Now, the pinging sounds from bedside medical monitors fill the air as doctors and nurses fully suited up in protective gear treat COVID-19 patients lying in beds with oxygen support. Now, this is the scene inside the intensive care unit of a hospital in Delhi as the number of cases surges in India. The country has registered about 10,000 new cases per day over the past week, with the total infection tally now over 275,000, the 5th highest in the world.
See, right now we are all standing in a medical ICU. So this is a 16-bed medical ICU where we have got all the critically ill patients who are requiring a lot of organ support. So as you can very well see, many of these patients are on ventilatory support. Many of them are also requiring support for the heart and the support for the kidneys, for which we are doing dialysis. See, obviously, we all have seen that the number of cases has increased in the last few days, and all our beds are 100% occupied.
So we're back to our conversation of the day, and those two stories actually point to those caregivers who are bound to face compassion fatigue if they do not practice self-care. Now, before we went to break, Isabella was talking about how taking care of her now late mother, who was suffering from dementia, at some point took a toll on her and she was suffering from fatigue. Isabella, what are the other symptoms you were facing?
The other symptoms are, okay, with dementia, it has several stages. There are the early stages, the middle stage, and the late stages. The worst stage is the late stage. Okay, I can say I was so much trying to get information through the Google, and I was able to get information about the changes at the late stage, whereby the patient is not experiencing something we call inconsistency, and then immobility, then gets to a point whereby this person is not able to swallow food. And at this point, when my mom got to the stage whereby she started having inconsistency, I got depressed, because now the reality was hitting on me that my mom is going. Because with the information that I was able to get, the last stage of dementia, because the doctor had told me there is no cure, so I thought it was so fast for my mom to die, because it was within a span of 4 years. No, the worst scenario was the caregiving, because I had to coordinate. I was a secondary caregiver. We had a primary caregiver who is somebody who was not trained to handle such cases. And to some extent, she used to make calls as in she's not able to cope up with some situation. And it was very hard for me, whereby you had to encourage her to try cope up. I could understand her situation, whereby she was also developing burnout. And to some extent, it was hard for me to think around, how do we handle this situation? No, the worst scenario came when my mom was not able to make movements, and she developed something we call the bed sores. And when I went home and saw the condition, I felt the lady who was taking care of her, she's not able, or she's tired of handling the situation. With our society, there is a situation whereby people talk of taking the aged people to nursing homes. But I sat back because I was not getting emotional support from people. I decided to make a drastic decision, and I took my mom to a nursing home, because I felt if I stay with her, I'm not able to give proper care in terms of she's not even able to feed. And in the nursing care, I was given an option of whereby she can feed using a tube. So I made the decision. I took her from the up country. I took her to the nursing home, whereby I was checking on her. Initially, there were people who were advising me to take her to a hospital. But I felt that if I take her to the hospital, one thing, they might not accept her because of the bed sores. Because the perception was, if a patient develops bed sores, that means there was neglect, and she might suffer more. So I felt the nursing home would give better care than taking her to the hospital, whereby she required 24 hours care.
Okay, Isabella.
It was not easy for me. Yeah.
Isabella, when you made the decision to take your mother,
I can hear you.
When you took a decision to take your mother to the nursing home, what did your family or your friends say about that?
it was all negative. I never got support, and most of the people were like, I didn't make the best decision. But now the whole issue which I had to fight with was I never got an option. They criticized the whole process, but none gave me an option. So at the end of the day, I had to assume everything.
I hear you, Isabella.
Because I felt on my head, I'm more so overwhelmed. I was also to take care of my health because to some extent I also developed something we call the brain fog because of stress. So I felt I might not be able to handle my mom's situation. At the same time, I'm also suffering.
We hear you, Isabella, and Dr. Konyu, I could see you nodding your head because you hear her struggle. Now, two things stand out for me from Isabella's story, and I think this was also brought up by Christina. Anticipatory grief, where you see your loved one is deteriorating and it doesn't matter what you do, it's just getting worse. Talk about anticipatory grief.
Yeah, so anticipatory grief, and I just really empathize with Isabella's situation. How, you see, we're saying it's important for you to do something to care for yourself. So here she is wanting to care for herself because it's getting too much for her, and yet those around her are not helping her, but also are then criticizing her decision. And so you're kind of in this catch-22. But I'm glad that she was able to take steps to actually think about how she's caring for herself. So in terms of this anticipatory grief, now this is this feeling where you know that the end is near, you're going to lose this person. It hasn't happened, but there is no like cure for the illness. And so you begin by first when you're told, and it relates very well with Elizabeth Kubler-Ross's grief stages, where first you're in denial. You're like, no, this can't be happening. And then you start, you get angry, and then you start bargaining. You're like, okay, Lord, if you do this, maybe this is not really going to happen. And then something happens where you begin to realize this thing is not changing. The person is not getting better. I'm actually going to lose them. I have a limited time with them. And so you get into this depressed place where you feel now, almost like that sense of helplessness. There's nothing you can do, that lack of control. And as you work through that is where you come to the place of acceptance. And then once you come to the place of acceptance, and it's not like it's a, kind of staircase step by step. It's sometimes a fluid process that you keep going back and forth. But when you come to the place of acceptance is where you're able to then make the most of what you have. So living in the moment of, okay, I still have my mother right now, and how can I make the most of it, right? Sometimes it's even having those hard conversations or having even opportunities to even say goodbye properly, because then you're able to see that this is nothing you can change, but you can start having those difficult or brief conversations so that you can, kind of have closure. It's not easy, but I think if you try to look at maybe the silver lining in that cloud is maybe you get a chance to actually say goodbye compared to maybe others who may not have had that opportunity to say it. But it's a lot of emotional work that you have to really grapple with, because this is, someone you expected to live much longer, and you're doing all that as you're also trying to care for them and deal with, like Isabella was saying, even dealing with aspects of like the paranoia or, her trying to see things that are not there on the TV and all that. So it's hard, and that's why we're saying you need support, that you shouldn't try to be doing this by yourself.
But then again, in her case and others, is that at times the support is not forthcoming.
That's true. Sadly, that is the reality for a lot of people, that that sometimes the support that you're anticipating is not there. And I think what I've realized is that there is both professional support, right? So like even you need information so that you know which kind of, like nursing care that the person needs. But then there is also the personal support that you need. So being able to find a balance between, am I getting like the medical and the professional help that I need, but then am I also getting safe spaces for me to process, like my mother is going through this, you know, am I having people that I can share these things with, share even some of the questions you're having towards God or towards, you know, am I doing enough? So you need both the professional help and the personal help. And that's not always easy to find.
Okay, now something else that came up, and I heard that a lot in what Isabella and Christina were talking about, and you could even hear with Isabella explaining the situation with her mom, is that she had a hard time making decisions because she felt somewhat guilty, you know, taking her mother to a nursing home, vis-a-vis having to cater for her as a primary caregiver, or Christina feeling that, oh my God, I slept through the night, I should have woken up to check on my mom. Talk about how this can play a number on you as a caregiver, and what to do to deter this.
Yeah, so I think the first place is being aware. You have to tune into what is happening emotionally. You have to be aware that I'm feeling something and this is what it is. Because then when you're not aware, you're not able to dig in and figure out exactly what it is. When you're able to figure out, okay, I'm feeling guilty, then you start beginning to interrogate that guilt. Am I really justified in feeling guilty? You know, I'm doing what's best for my mother by taking her to a nursing home, right? Because I can't cope. And the kind of care that I have is not sufficient, right? So the guilt is almost like a false guilt, but if I don't really know it, then I can't really interrogate it because, you know, I'm not being aware of it. So I think what I'm trying to say is when you have to tune into what's going on so that you really kind of pass out, is this justified guilt? It's just a guilt that's just over me for nothing? And then how do I reframe that experience? Because our thoughts will cause us to feel things. So how I'm interpreting the situation will then form how I'm feeling, right? But if I'm able to say, yes, I may want to care for my mother on my own, but the reality is that I can't. I need help. Then that can ease off that base of guilt that may be fueling some of those decisions. Or I'm trying to do my very best, right? And then you ease yourself for feeling the pressure of like, but no, you need to do some more. And also seeing that you caring for yourself is actually a gift that you're giving the person that you're caring for. So the more healthy you are, the more your reservoirs are full, the better a caregiver you can be for the person that needs your care. And so seeing it as I'm doing something for myself. No, you're even doing something for the person that you're caring for. You know, by caring for yourself.
Okay, and I hear a lot of self-awareness is important as a caregiver, but also vulnerability is also key in helping you along in that journey. James, you said there are times where you felt you were not doing too well. At that point, did you get vulnerable enough to share your struggles with somebody else apart from your wife, maybe other men who are a support system in your life?
At some point, I found that I have to get help from someone. I shared with people, but at some point, I realized that the more you share, the more you become vulnerable to making wrong decisions.
Really?
Let me put it here that initially, as I said, as a man, and I can see even in the panel, it's like I'm the only man here. There's a very, very big issue with men. I've seen a lot of challenges because, you know, as men, first of all, you're not supposed to share something that is very negative. The way we are brought up, our cultural, social setups and all that, you have to break from a lot of them. But as the doctor said, I started with professional advice where I sat down with the doctors, like the one I told you, who told me you have to stand. I don't know how you're going to do it, but you have to stand with your family. I also got one or two friends whom I used to share with along the way. But that has helped a lot. But let me say the biggest problem has always been lack of proper social support mechanisms where maybe you can, or someone who can walk with you along the journey. Some of them are within the society, within the communities we live in, within families, and even within the policy framework. You'll find that there's a very huge disconnect, a very big, almost dysfunctional social support systems. And this goes along in hurting these families in such situations. I have listened to a number of speakers there, and like the common denominator is anguish, and in some cases, like I've experienced with a number of friends that I've interacted with, breakage of families, because you see, it reaches a point, if you are not wise enough or if you're not getting good counsel, you'll find disintegration of families. Yeah. You'll find a lot of misunderstandings. And remember, at this point, the emotions are always very high. We are dealing with someone who is not only stressed, but distressed as well. Mm-hmm. So I have seen breakages of families, and in particular, the issue of disability. I've witnessed a number of cases where the children are taken to rural areas, they're staying with the grandmothers. It is pathetic. But I blame all of it due to lack of proper support mechanisms. And I'm hoping that by creating this awareness, talking to society, reaching out to policymakers, something can be put in place, because this is so much important a topic. I remember when I'm in similar situation, I'm in this predicament of my two children together with my wife. Some 2 years back, I lost my dad through cancer. And during the last stages, I almost thank God, because I was used, for example, with my George, as I've told you, my son, who is now 17 years. Issue of changing diapers was not an issue for me. When the family was not understanding some scenarios, it was not difficult for me. And I could detect, or I could be able to see that society has so much that it needs to learn. And most of the families that I've interacted with, I have found that whenever there is a very, very serious ailment, one that takes long, or even the case of disability that I'm dealing with that takes years, where you are dealing with an adult, you can imagine the issue of birthing an adult. I don't know whether people can figure out, think about it in practical terms. Yeah. Changing diapers, toileting and all that, it's not easy. But if the society does not understand this, and that is why you find families breaking, because something has come up, there's been an accident, there's been this cancer, or terrible issues that comes in the family. Yes, and because the family is not prepared, you fight disintegration.
I hear you. I hear you. And Christina, you have been on the journey of compassion fatigue enough for you to even understand the importance of supporting other caregivers. In these support groups, have you found that there are fewer men than there are women?
Yes, there are fewer men than there are women. And I think it's the way society is wired. Because men are told, "Kaki mwanamume, be strong." Even female caregivers struggle because they're expected to be superwoman. But generally, men are a forgotten army in the caregiving journey. And I think one of the connectedness is so important. And one of the best ways to connect and get social support is to get it from people who are going through a similar journey to yours, because then they get you. Then when you say, "I'm stressed out," they don't look at you like you're tired of taking care of your wife or of your child. So connecting with people who get you, people who are also caregivers, is very important.
Okay, and in your case, did you ever seek professional help for the compassion fatigue?
No, I didn't. One time a friend of mine asked me, "Would you like to talk to so-and-so, who is her sister-in-law, who is a psychologist?" And I thought, no, I don't need help. In retrospect, perhaps I would have. Yes, in retrospect, perhaps I would have. But by God's grace, I was able to journey through and to process. I think God really helped me.
I hear you. Now, for Anne, who's still with us on phone. Anne, have you ever sought professional help for all the challenges you're going through? And important for your mental well-being? All right, we seem to have lost Anne, but do we have her? All right, Isabella, have you sought professional help? Because you mentioned you were suffering from a brain fog.
Yeah, that's the only time I went to the hospital. But I saw a general practitioner who told me I could be suffering from brain fog because of stress. But he was able to help me cope with the situation, whereby he advised me to avoid stressful situations. And at this time, I decided not to engage anybody in regard to my mom's issue, whereby it could bring more stress to my life. So that's the only time I had to seek professional help. But after my mom passed on, I decided to heal naturally. But at the moment, I'm coping well.
Okay, so you have not sought professional help even now?
Yeah, I have not.
Okay, now I'm told that Anne is now on the line. Anne, have you ever sought professional help?
Yes, by that time I was given some drugs because I was not sleeping, I was not eating. So I was given some drugs for vitamins and to make me sleep.
A general practitioner, or did you actually see a psychologist or a counselor?
It was a general practitioner, a company doctor actually.
Okay, and we are also joined by Patience Mbambazi, who is joining us from Uganda. She's the director of the Hydrocephalus and Spina Bifida Initiative in Uganda. Patience, thank you for your time. How long have you been running this initiative?
Good morning. I'm Patience Mbambazi. I'm from Uganda, and our organization has been there for 10 years.
Yes. And are you the only one who runs this, or you have a team?
We have a team of 10 people, and social workers, and we have 184 patients.
Okay, now do we have the graphics for the hydrocephalus so that we can understand the kind of patients she deals with? Well, I'll touch on it. Hydrocephalus is actually the buildup of fluid in the cavities deep within the brain. So most often than not, you have seen children that have a bigger head than normal, and the excess fluid increases the size of the ventricles and puts pressure on the brain. Now, it can happen at any age, but it occurs more frequently among infants and adults 60 and over. Now, these are the kind of children you cater for on a daily, meaning it is an intense job. How do you cater for yourself?
As I'm also a mother in an organization, I'm a parent, and we do awareness to the community. We do counseling and referral for children for proper treatment to Kiwa Hospital, which is in Mbale. Yes.
Okay. How do you take care of yourself? Because you cater for how many children?
184 patients. And as I'm a hotel management, and I have a business.
So how do you ensure you cater for your well-being amongst all these balls in the air?
I do.
Can you hear me?
Sorry? Sorry, are you getting me?
Yes, now we are. Yes, now we are.
Okay. Hello.
Okay, I'm asking, how do you cope with everything you have to deal with on a daily?
It is not easy, because financially, as an organization, we don't have a stable financial. We just do this as charity work, so it is not easy for us to cope up with a daily life for these parents.
Okay, and who are your support systems, whether in the initiative or even on a personal level?
We give training to the patients, the parents to daily income activities, as we train them how to make money, like earning daily money, which can help them to get some little money for their children, because it is not easy to support their children when they are seated at home, because children, they take a lot of their time. And being they are poor and single parents, because many of the parents are single, so we take our time and give them trainings so that they can earn a daily bread for their children, for their families.
Now, Patience, this is something you do on a daily, and you are a parent and you cater for these children and, of course, their parents too. Do you get to a point where you feel it's too much going on at the same time?
Yes, it is too much for the parents.
For you,
it is not easy.
For you,
and for me, it is not easy for me. But I try my best, because I feel like I should do it. Because if I don't come up and stand on their behalf, some of them, they are on my shoulders. So it is not easy for us. But with God's mercy, we try our best to see that we can do what is necessary for these parents.
Do you ever have time for yourself?
Yes, I do.
And what do you do for fun?
I have a shop for tailoring. I had 19 years, and I have a small restaurant. So I sometimes I get time for myself.
Okay, you are a pretty busy woman, Patience, but also one that has a big heart, even as you actually oversee the Hydrocephalus and Spina Bifida initiative in Uganda. We take a short break on Your World. We'll be back with more, even as we hear from our caregivers. Stay with us. At this point, we go back to the conversation of the day, compassion fatigue, and we are learning so much from everyone, even as we're listening on the coping mechanisms and how you as a caregiver can find yourself at crossroads with compassion fatigue. And Dr. Konyu, just listening to everybody, I think it is important to keep reiterating that the coping mechanisms need to be very, very intentional, because if you are not coping well, you can end up in the destructive side of things. What are these destructive measures you've seen along the way?
Yeah, so you're right. There has to be some intentionality about being able to take care of yourself or prioritize your own care. Some of the destructive ones are like, you know, maybe drinking, a lot of addictions. Because remember, you're feeling things, whether you're tuned into them or not. And so one way that people try to numb or try to process or try to unconsciously deal with those is addictive behaviors. So like using substances, sexual activity. It could be in the form of pornography or actual sexual engagement. It could also be food. Some people are addicted to food. So anything that's not replenishing you in a way that's healthy is something that you need to pay attention to. And then do positive things like, you know, taking a walk. Exercising is important. Paying attention to your sleep. Sleep is, I think, something we underrate so much, but it is such a big key in terms of our mental state. So it replenishes us not just physically, but even mentally. So paying attention to your sleep, to your eating is something that's very important. And then an outlet for your emotions. Like we're saying, there's so much emotional stuff that's going on. There needs to be a space to process that. Either socially with people that you feel safe with, that you can confide in, that you can, you know, kind of let your guard down and really just share what's going on. It could also be on your own, like you can journal. Journaling is a good way to take all the stuff that you're thinking, all the stuff that you're feeling, and give it an outlet. Through writing, some people who don't enjoy writing, even recording on your phone, you know, like just recording yourself as a way to kind of get all that out. Also getting spiritual support and wrestling with those spiritual questions. Giving yourself space to, you know, wrestle with God of like, Aki, God, this thing, why is it happening to me, you know? But I feel like sometimes we don't give that space. We're just supposed to accept, and then you end up kind of nurturing this sense of anger towards God that makes you withdraw and then become distant and kind of cut off yourself from this very wellspring that could be a source of support in this very difficult time, you know. So finding a space and finding spiritual support that can sit with those questions with you and not try to put everything as though just giving those cliche of answers of, you know, God loves you, God is good. As in, yeah, he loves me and is good, but this thing is hard. You know, how can I see him in this mess of the stuff that I'm feeling and I'm going through? And also that it's such a long journey.
Okay. Now, we had spoken to patients from Uganda earlier, and she said as much as she has this initiative to run, she also has other businesses, and I asked her what she does for fun to keep it all together. And she says there's some few things that she engages in. Talk about the importance of probably looking into taking up hobbies and taking self-awareness or self-time, you know, just to cater for yourself without feeling the guilt of doing the same.
Yeah, so when we're dealing with caring for ourselves, we almost have to break this stigma of caring for yourself is a bad thing, right? And I keep saying stigma is broken one person at a time. So being intentional about doing things that you enjoy, hobbies, fun things that replenish you, because having a chance to experience these positive emotions is a way that you're filling in your emotional tank that's depleted and being drained by this constant caring for somebody else, right? So finding hobbies, things that make you laugh, that make you distract you from not just all the time focusing on I'm caring for this person. So because those are again places where you're letting your emotions have an outlet and bring something that brings you joy, and that helps to replenish you so that now you have more reservoir for you to care for your loved one. So again, like I keep reiterating, caring for yourself, doing all these fun things for yourself is a gift you're giving the person you're caring for. So it's not, so that helps deal with that selfishness kind of mindset of, if I care for myself, then I'm being selfish. No, you're actually looking out for the other person. If the idea of caring for yourself may feel like it's too personal or too selfish.
And I had asked everyone before we went to break if any of them have sought professional counseling or, you know, intervention in their journey, and most of them said no, they haven't. Is it important to actually, you know, reach out to somebody who can counsel you through the process?
It is so important. You know, I think about the analogy of, like, you know how you take your car for maintenance, you take to the garage and, you know, to make sure it's running well, and that if you neglect it, you end up going when it's really bad and even it costs you more. The same way when you have a toothache, you go to the dentist. So there's almost psychologists are doctors for your emotions, for your mind. So rather than trying to battle that by yourself, help is available. And yes, you need to push past the stereotype of seeking help is something that's weak. That's not true, right? If I have a toothache, it's not weak for me to go to a dentist, right? If my emotions are struggling, if I'm needing more coping skills, it's not wrong for me to seek help from a mental health professional, right? So kind of reframing and seeing, you know, I'm caring for my emotions, I'm caring for my mind, I'm doing this to be able to be a healthy person, I think is so important. And you have to push past, even like the way the males are supposed to be strong and all together. Who said this? This society and this stigma is you and me. So you and me can do something different so that we begin to disintegrate this thinking, because it destroys our men. It destroys our caregivers. And we need to care for one another. So that one propagating, let's counter it with no, maybe that one is doing it, but me, I'll choose to do something different today to be healthier.
Okay, and I'm getting a message here from Elizabeth, who says this is such a much needed conversation. Thank you for having it, and we'll continue doing so through your stories. And speaking of which, James, we're bringing this conversation to an end. From the experience you've gone through as a caregiver, what is your advice to other caregivers?
Thank you very much. What I can tell my fellow caregivers is that information is power, number one. Much as it is good to consult, at the end of the day, you have to be the master. And it has to reach a point whereby you have to filter that which is going to work for you and that which will not work for you. And you go for that which is best. And the key thing, as it has been emphasized here, I know this in the fraternity I come from, disability sector, there's this big fear about if I pass on, who is going to take care of my child or my children? Now that I have even noticed in my lifetime, most people cannot be able to handle, even at family level. So the critical thing is, first of all, to take care of yourself, as it has been emphasized. And that is why I've said, personally, I've put aside a lot of things, and I focus on that which is going to build me, my wife, and my children. That is most important. Even if you're to engage outside, you have to cut out on so many things. And I also tell my fellow men, it is challenging because at the end of the day, you're expected to show that there is a responsibility and show the way. Never ever digress and go to these habits, maybe of drinking, drugs and alcohol, or breaking homes and throwing the wife away, listening to, it should not work like that. I think it should always take this responsibility. And I believe at the end of the day, no matter how long it takes, it is your responsibility. And God will stand by you.
We hear you. Thank you, James. And on Sunday, do we still have her on the phone? Anne?
Yes, I am here.
Okay, even as we close this conversation, what would you advise other caregivers and also the support systems around these caregivers?
My advice to fellow caregivers is, first of all, you should not forget about yourself as you do caregiving to the patient. Take one day at a time. And to the society, I wish that our country, Kenya, can make more awareness of this caregiving thing for everyone to understand and for it to be like a national thing.
Wish you all the best, even as you cater for your sister. Now, Isabella, for you, you not only took care of your mother, but now you are grieving her loss. And considering the experiences you've gone through, your parting shot.
What I can say is it is important to seek support group whereby you get people who are also walking the same journey that you're walking through. You can also try to maybe get people who are also familiar in the field that is touching your life. And more so to the society, it's good for the government to create awareness because there is a lot of stigma in it. And with the stigma comes together with the stress whereby the people who are walking the journey are not able to get emotional support from the people who are supposed to. Other than, I always say emotional support is much more better than even the financial support. Yeah.
I hear you, Isabella. I hear you. And thank you so much for being so candid and sharing your journey with us. And Christina, you have been at this for a while. Taking other caregivers through this journey, what is your parting shot?
I think I'd say for connecting. Connect with God. And when you find that difficult, for me, the book of Psalms in the Bible helps because there's so much being for real. Where are you, God? How long? What's going on? I'm crying to you. So connect with God. Connect with yourself. Get to know what you're feeling. Understand, process. Allow yourself to be for real. Connect with others. Others who get you. Others who understand you. And connect with caregiver education. Because then you'll begin to know that you're not alone, it's normal, and that you can actually work through it. So I'd say connect with those four.
Thank you, Christina. And definitely Patience, who joined us from Uganda. She's still with us. You carry quite a heavy load on you as the director of the Hydrocephalus and Spina Bifida Initiative in Uganda, also a businessman, a mother yourself. That's a lot to deal with, but you seem to have found a balance in it all. What would be your advice to other people who are in a position of caregiving?
The advice I give for the parents is to accept that the children are part of their life and accept what came their way, so that it does not become too hard for them. If you accept something, this is part of me, it is easier for you to treat that child. And I think to the community also, if you become part of your child, even the community will take care of this child. So I advise all parents, even the community, to accept that if the child is born in the way he is, or the way he is, we accept and support this child.
Okay, thank you. Patience Mbabazi, who joined us from Uganda. And Dr. Konyu, we've learned a lot along the way, and clearly the pandemic has brought out the importance of catering for self, especially in the process of a caregiver. And we mentioned there are people like parents and definitely people like those who cater for wives who have lost children or have had a miscarriage. So you're not the one going through the pain directly, but you're still catering for them. Talk about how to cope with such situations.
Yeah, no, I think re-emphasizing this idea of you have to be just like you're tuned into the needs of the person you're caring for, you also have to tune into your own needs and find ways to be able to replenish that. So that idea of self-awareness, taking stock of where am I in terms of my emotional tank, in terms of my stress levels. Am I vulnerable to actually get into compassion fatigue, or am I doing the things that will protect me from not getting compassion fatigue, such as self-care, such as social support, right? So that's important. Another thing I would say is seek help. Professionally, when it feels like you can't be able to manage by yourself. I really like this idea of seeking peer support so that you're feeling like it breaks this sense of isolation of feeling like I'm the only one going through this thing. And then also just getting personal help, either for the physical things that you need, but also for the emotional, safe spaces where you can actually get the help that you need. And I think I would say finally is like start small, right? Look for one practical thing that you can do. Maybe it's making sure that you're sleeping at a particular time. Maybe it's the eating that you need to deal with. Maybe it's some physical exercise. So find a way to start small so that you're trying to have enough energy to go for this marathon. And I like the analogy of the plane where they tell you put on your own oxygen mask before you help the toddler. So I think with caregivers, think about putting on your own mask even as you help to put the toddler's mask as well, or the person that you're caring for. So think about yourself first.
And quickly before we close, please speak directly to our healthcare professionals, because at times when you're a doctor, you think you're always good, but this has been quite a season, even for them. They've taken in a lot more than the usual.
Yeah, so I want to speak to healthcare professionals. Just being a healthcare professional myself, it's so easy for us to think about other people and be out there to make sure that their needs are being met, and then end up neglecting our own selves. So I want to say that the gift that you can give the clients and the patients that you're taking care of is being able to also make sure that you are at your best. And being at your best means prioritizing your own care, your own well-being. Think about yourself physically, think about yourself emotionally, socially, spiritually. So what things are you doing, and what rhythms, routines, not just a one-time thing. It has to be something that's habitual, so that you're constantly, as you're pouring out, you're also pouring in. This kind of dichotomy of pouring out and pouring in. So I encourage us to really be intentional about pursuing self-care for ourselves, so that we're better able to serve our patients.
Excellent. Dr. Sheila Konyu-Mushemi, who is a clinical psychologist, James Kabindu, a caregiver, Christina Were, caregiver too, and Sunday Akali, Isabella Waruguru, all caregivers who joined us on this conversation. And of course, patients all the way from Uganda. We learned a lot from you, and I'm sure a lot of other caregivers who never even thought that their role matters, and that they have to look inward to ensure that they keep themselves well enough to cater for other people, got the message. Well, remember, we will be here with you tomorrow as Joseph Warungu will be taking stock on the welfare of the elderly, especially in the face of the pandemic, and what vital lessons about their care have come out of it. See you tomorrow.